Welcome back, everyone, to another podcast, the official NASEF Scholastic Esports Academy 101 podcast. This is episode 2, and we'll be focusing on career technical education. I'm joined here by a lovely group of amazing educational leaders. Before we get started, let me introduce myself. My name is Jarrell Batak, the Chief Operating Officer for NASEF. And join with me here today, please feel free to intro.
Hi, everyone. I'm Regina Schaefer. I am the Vice President of Garden State Esports, and I'm an EdTech Specialist in Middletown, New Jersey.
Sweet. I'll go next. Pablo Larios. I am a high school CTE educator and a NASEF mentor. So, hi, everybody.
My name's Chris Aviles. I am the president of Garden State Esports and also an English teacher at Keyport High School in New Jersey, where I run a year-long esports elective.
Okay, so I'll go on ahead and go. I was waiting for Doug. Hello, everyone. My name is Bradford Harris. I am in Houston, Texas. I am the Director of Learning for Texas Scholastic Esports Federation, and I am an education strategist for SHI.
And last but not least,
hi, everybody. I'm Doug Boersma. I'm the Dean of Students at the Scranton School for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Children, and also the Esports Director for the Western Pennsylvania School for the Deaf Abington Heights Comets Hybrid Esports Team. And we'll talk to you a little bit more about that later on.
Pretty exciting, and we'll have some special guests a little bit later on in our podcast today, or our video cast, however you want to call it. Before we jump in, we spent a lot of time during the last podcast really defining what Scholastic Esports is. I think as part of this podcast, we really want to keep reinforcing the meaning and the why behind why we do Scholastic Esports. So why don't we take a moment again to redefine it, but maybe with a slight twist and emphasis on some of the career technical education skills that are available through the lens of esports and gaming. So if you don't mind, I'll ask this question to the group, and then everyone can jump in. If you could maybe summarize Scholastic Esports, again, through the lens of CTE, in maybe 1 to 2 sentences, how would you define it?
Dang, I'll take this one. This is a good question. And I see Chris nodding his head. He's like, wow, Drell, you really knocked this one out the park. I would say CTE, esports, the combination of the two together is, for me, being a graphic design instructor, is being able to use those creative skills, those design skills, to be able to teach the ecosystem of design of esports, the marketing, the streaming that we're doing right now for you all those little tidbits to be able to design and teach that is esports. That is what we do in CTE.
Love that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, running Garden State Esports, running my own program, and Regina and I have seen, there's kids who come out and they want to be the starters, the competitive players, but then there's just as many kids who want to come out and they want to run the behind the scenes.
Yes.
And so from a CTE lens, I always explain it to my high school kids, it's a great way to get hands-on experience with lucrative jobs. And you really can't be serious about STEM without being serious about esports and gaming, because that's where a lot of these jobs are going to be. So for me, it's a way to build a team behind the team, and give everybody the opportunity to build a, world-class resume when they go and apply for colleges.
What do you think, Doug, Bradford, Regina?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this. I think that CTE and esports provides an incredible opportunity for students and opportunities to pursue their passions, to validate where their interests lie. And so, a student who says, I just want to be a gamer, mom and dad may struggle with that. But when you attach the the STEM value to it through CTE. You get that parental buy-in, and we know for success for students, parental support is such a huge factor. And I think that that's something that validates to the old guard like myself. This has a real world value to it for our students.
I'm just going to echo that especially since I have older kids who are no longer in K-12s, I have a whole new perspective now on what Scholastic Esports is and CTE is, because we're preparing children to enter into the workforce, the real world. And when you look at it from that lens, you're not looking at just what you see at face value, the video game player or those 6 players playing whatever game for that tournament. You're looking at really what is going on behind the scenes, and the industry is calling for the producers, that talent behind the scenes, to build um, brackets and produce and do the websites. All that stuff is required to be a part of an esports program.
Regina, any additional thoughts?
No, I pretty much agree with what everyone has said. I didn't want to echo it.
No worries. I think, when we're talking about CTE and we're defining career technical education, I think it's important for our audience to understand. I mean, it looks different for every single district, every single program, right? I think in some cases, CTE programs are typically articulated pathways that maybe are attached to some sort of industry certification as part of that articulated pathway. And so I guess my next question for you all is maybe diving into more specifics around that alignment of CTE and esports. And I'll point this again to Pablo to kick it off, because we've worked on various projects really looking at that intersection of graphic arts, design, and CTE, and the potential certifications. And there's a lot of discussion and debate around this at the moment.
Definitely. And like you said, we've worked on a couple of cool projects when I was in the fellows program, but being able to tie in the idea of graphic design to esports, I tell my students all the time, what I teach you could be a hustle. It could be something to help you thrive in this world. And it may not necessarily be in esports. It could be in some types of sports marketing, even though esports falls into that category. But being able to come up with these ideas and bring them to life, teach them relevance and how that relevance can create a paycheck, that's the aha moments. I don't know how else to say it. It's an aha moment.
So many ahas. What about everyone else? What are your thoughts, and how do CTE programs typically align to Scholastic Esports?
So, I mean, I think similar to what Pablo was talking about is a lot of these traditional jobs, have a home in esports and vice versa, right? A lot of these kids who are driven by their passion for gaming, and they want to do the graphic design for, Twitch creators or YouTubers or their own esports team. It's employable skills. And I think that's the biggest thing is, when I talk to not just some of these companies that, some of these kids may want to work for, when I talk to, Gen G, or when I talk to like a Riot, they want the employable skills. And then they also want the soft skills, right? People who show up on time, people who are passionate, people who are coachable. And it's a great way. Again, what I love about the CTE field is it's hands-on. Right? It's not so much theory. It's not so much out of the textbook. It's not multiple choice questions. It's, can you design a good looking graphic for your esports team? Right. So there's always a lot of purpose in it too. They're designing it for something, which again models the real world. But similarly, right, to Pablo and the type of school district I teach in Title I school, I let the kids know that even if you don't use this or you wind up in esports, I said, we just finished a unit on branding where we talked about how they're part of an esports team. And then as part of that esports team, they could build their own personal brand. So I had a lot of kids not just doing video design, graphic design, and a bunch of stuff for the team, but then they also wound up going to do all this stuff for themselves and wanting to grow their own brand. And then we talked about building a community and all that good stuff. It could be a hustle. It could be a way for these kids to have, off resume skill set. oh, by the way, I'm also, proficient in these things because I did it for my esports team.
Yep.
And I think that's the other big thing too, is more and more what I've come to appreciate and what I've seen that esports is allowing kids to do is not saying like, oh, I can do this. Like, here's what I've done. Here's what I've designed. Here's what I've made. Here's what I've created. Here's what I've written. Like one of the things we're announcing through Garden State Esports is a partnership with Sports Illustrated, where every kid is going to get the opportunity to have something published. And so imagine graduating from high school where you have a byline. You wrote an article that was put in, Sports Illustrated's online edition. So you're talking about now it's, again, that resume, it's like a here's what we've done kind of situation. And I think to me, in a world where with all the social media and it's never been easier to talk, you know what I mean? CTE is something that makes people do it. And that's what I've come to appreciate, at least over the last couple of years, is I want my kids to be doers, not just talkers.
I agree with that 100%. I was never in that space. Yes, I'm ed tech, but where I worked, it's a clear separation between digital learning ed tech and CTE. I don't know if it's like that anywhere else, but from where I stood, there was a clear separation. And so I didn't get to experience what that was. Even with my own kids who were in another district, they weren't a part of that. So I got to see things from afar. So I really didn't get the connection until my kids graduated, because my mindset was, all right, you got to get a job. So everything that you learn from daddy and ed tech, how does that get you a job? That was my whole focus. And then I will never forget when I took my daughter to see The Weeknd, I saw CTE all over the place. From the moment they started to the moment The Weeknd didn't even say thank you, good night, and walked away, I was like, oh my God, it's all over. The Weeknd wasn't even the focus. I was focusing on what was going on in production. I was focusing on what they were doing to put the panels up. I was focusing on what the DJ was doing. I was focusing on what the roadies were doing. And I was telling my daughter about it. She was schooling me. She's not even in CTE, but she said, this is where the money is. And I said, this is exactly where the money is. It's hands-on. And the one thing, Chris, that I'm going to add to it is you can walk in, I'm going to say 8th grade, 9th grade. I don't know specifically when it starts. I'm going to say 8th grade, 9th grade. And already be that business mogul already. You don't have to wait your senior year to start. You can start at that young age and be that mogul that you always meant to be. So by the time your senior year graduated, you have this portfolio. That's what amazes me.
Well, and I was in middle school for 5 or 6 years running esports electives, and now I'm at high school, and I've seen it firsthand. Or Regina too. Regina, tell them about the student you had that was getting paid to moderate, Discord and all the other cool stuff he was doing.
My first year doing esports at my middle school, I was setting up all of the streaming in the back end, and students were helping me. And they pointed me to a student. They said he wasn't part of our esports program, but they said he can help us with OBS and all of that, our Twitch channel. And so I went up to him and I said, I need you to help me. The students all said that you do it. And he said, Ms. Schaefer, I will do it for you because you've always been nice to me at lunch. But I charge for this. And handed me his card. And I looked at him and he did. He said, I do this professionally. And then I found out that so many of my students in the esports program were doing this on the side. They were living this whole other world in Twitch as content creators that I know their teachers didn't know and I didn't know. So I think that's the connection we need to make as well. Everyone knows I'm very passionate about, the skill sets that students have in esports, and that we connect that in a meaningful way in the classroom, and also educating the educators so that they are aware of the skill set that a lot of our students have since they are in the gaming world. Yeah. So, yes.
It all falls back to the ecosystem.
Yeah, for sure. Regina, I'll just jump on that also. And I love the connection there between they're already doing it and what we're trying to do. And so I think within education, we're constantly talking about student engagement. How can we increase that? How can we improve that? And well, it's right there in front of us already. It's already happening. And when we can give a student not here, we're going to teach you how to do this, but we're going to give you a springboard that helps you launch into your wildest imaginations towards the thing that you're already passionate about, that creates its own momentum within the classroom. It creates its own momentum within the program. And you can see administration going, what is going on? This is what we want. And you can get that buy-in from them. So I think about that as a starting point for inspiration and engagement with students, because they're already doing it. And if we can provide them the supports and the space and the equipment to do it, they can really just go way further than I ever will with this.
You know, it's interesting because we're having this conversation and we're trying to define CTE. I think we have lined up in our questions here to talk about STEM. These are all just like edu acronyms that we like to throw at all of these different ideas. But at the end of the day, like you're all saying, you know, and I'm seeing this question in the chat, even asking about their own sophomore in a STEM high school, and they're already doing it, right? So in essence, it's kind of us as the educators having to adapt to the learning that's already happening outside of our educational spaces. And how do we bring that and integrate that into it to allow for all of these young people that are already doing these things to actually do it for their school and be connected to the school. So let's dive a little bit deeper and let's actually, before we get into that, let's answer this question. If we can just bring it up on the screen here, a little bit long here, but they're asking about really, they're already in an IT pathway in school, right? They're at a STEM high school specifically. They're focused on game dev and sound design. What are some suggestions to get into the industry? And it sounds like they're already collaborating on Twitch and Discord, but they're really looking to take it to the next level. What are all of your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I responded, make something. Have something to show people. Unreal Engine 5 is free to use and it's unbelievable. There's so much content out there on YouTube, on all these other platforms with people just giving this stuff away for free, you know, these how-to videos and stuff like that. Make something, you know what I mean? And I think even too is, it's interesting. I don't know if you're seeing it, Pablo, you know, in high schools out there or Doug, you know, in Penn, but more and more, I see my kids getting scooped up in internships and hired just based on their existing skill set. You know what I mean? Like you look back at a game like Undertale, which was made by one kid, which was a passion project and went on to be one of the best-selling games of the year, won a number of awards. Nobody asked that kid for like his video game degree. Nobody asked him where he studied sound design. Like the kid just made something and it was fantastic. So, you know, and that's my advice to my high school kids a lot of the times too, is, you know, how do I do that? Just create something. Like this is moving, you know, like Bradford said earlier, we're moving from consumers to producers. Like we have to start producing stuff. And these kids have all the tools necessary. And I think sometimes as educators, we get nervous because maybe we don't, you know, I don't know everything about Unreal Engine 5. I know a little bit. I know enough just to be dangerous. But then I learned side by side with the kid. I tell the kid, look, hey, you know, I've taken you as far as I can. Like, you better believe I DM Pablo for advice on graphic design because I only know so much. So I'm like, Pablo, help me out, dude. You know, so I think that showcases not just the value of connections and networking and your relationships, but also all of these tools are out there for free. There's nothing stopping this kid, the sophomore, from just making something. If he's so passionate about sound design, he's so passionate about video game, just build one level. Because I think that's the other thing is so often kids think they have to have this whole finished, polished, like just put out like just one level, put out one something and you build on it. And then that, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I see so much opportunity, but I also see, at least in my students, that they're so afraid of failure sometimes that they rather do nothing. Yeah. They have all the tools, they have all the access in the world, they have, you know, an entire, you know, humanities knowledge on the internet. They could go and learn and find everything that they need. And they're just like, yeah, but I mean, I don't know. If you want to make a video game, make a video game. Yeah.
I think added to that, we got to teach them, I don't know if we have to teach them, but how to just build their own portfolio. I mean, I'm looking at this post, it's LinkedIn. He needs to be on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. Put him on LinkedIn. It doesn't matter. Like, there's a kid that I follow that he's like 16 and he's like an entrepreneur on LinkedIn, and he's doing amazing stuff. I forget the guy's name. However, um, I'm on LinkedIn on a daily basis, not to find a job, but there's other stuff that's on there that I'm reading and I'm digesting on a daily basis. One of those is what is it? Hit marker. That is on point. Like if you could get your son on there, there's like tons of things that are remote internships just on the fly. I mean, there are just people companies out there that you haven't even heard of. You don't have to necessarily get to the riots or the unreals or whatever the big popular ones are out there. A lot of people, I remember being in a conference last year. They're looking for, okay, what have you done on these smaller independent companies? Because sometimes you just can't jump all the way to get to Sony that quick. What have you done like right here? There is that saying, started from the bottom, now we're here. That does make sense. You got to start from somewhere. So like building that portfolio, getting him on LinkedIn, that's what I think he should do. But Chris, you are right. Like it's hard putting them out there like that when they're used to it. I think like even my kids, it's their world. They were introduced to that from day one, so they don't know what a portfolio looks like because they've been doing it for so long that they don't know how to frame that and what that looks like.
Yeah. I mean, and even adding to that too is you think about the portfolio, think about the opportunities, you think about the access they have. The other side of access is the ability to connect with anybody, right? So great advice to get this kid a LinkedIn profile. You know, I remember at the end of last year, I had a girl who wanted to write stories for video games. She just loved to write, but she wanted to write for. I DM'd the head of Supergiant Games, who makes Hades and Transistor, Pyre. Like Hades was unbelievable. And the head story writer for Supergiant Games is like, yeah, I'm happy to talk to this kid for half an hour. And so, you know, same thing again, like, you know, maybe not part of a major studio, but a fantastic studio, volunteered just to talk to this kid one-on-one for half an hour about writing video games. Yeah. So I think that too is you got to make that leap. And I think a lot of times is I've had a lot of my high school kids have success almost getting their own internships where they're just like, hey, I love video games. I made this thing. Can you look at it? I would love to learn from you. Is there stuff I could do to help, you know, the company or whatever? Yeah. And again, go, Regina.
I was going to say, like, also for the adults, we're in a different era. We're in an era where all of these people are accessible in a way via social media that they weren't previously. So 20 years ago, these people would not have been accessible to students or us or anyone, right? But now with social media and the evolution of the way we do business, I feel like a lot of these people are very accessible. Everyone is on social media at every level, frankly. So that's something to me that adults have to sort of make the shift with, of thinking that way, where students know that because they've always been on social media. That's always been accessible to them and part of their world.
Oh, for sure. Let me like bounce off some of those ideas. I know Bradford talked about Hitmaker. Hitmaker is an awesome website. I've looked at it myself. I'm not going to lie. I've looked at it. Some amazing opportunities. But, you know, if the kid knows what they want to do in game development and they know what they want to do in sound engineer, go to artstation.com. It's legit the website that a lot of the industry pros use to upload their artwork, design work, animations, and all that stuff, that then they have access to this direct artist's portfolio, similar to Behance, but a little bit more exclusive, right? And then you can reach out and ask them. And it's us teaching our students to do the ask. Because if we don't instill that in them, they're just gonna be like, I don't know, like, just try it. I still reach out to industry pros and be like, hey, take a look at this. What do you think? Do you have the time? And then they reply back whether they have the time or not. You know, and you're gonna run into the world where there's gonna be jerks. That's true. No matter where we're at, there's always gonna be that one individual. But you don't know that unless you ask. And if they come back with a negative response saying like, oh, cool, appreciate your time, let me go ask this artist or let me go ask this individual. It's just teaching our students to be brave enough to do the ask.
Yeah. I mean, I tell my kids, you know, what you ask and they say no, you're in the exact same position than if you did nothing at all. I said, so what's the harm? So you're right. Yes. And that art station, that's really, I'm going to check it out because I posted on my Twitter when I started over, you know, back in high school for this same thing. I said, where can I get my kids, video edits. Where can I get my kids graphics? I said, how do I get these kids noticed? I know about like GitHub and that being the place for the coders. I didn't know where that art place was. And I got a lot of feedback that Behance was like a place to be. But I'll check out ArtStation too, because that's the other thing is you got to get these, you got to be able to get these kids on the right platform to get noticed. So whether it's LinkedIn to build a network or ArtStation to, get their stuff out there.
Even with like teaching our kids design, right? Like ArtStation, since it has the official like licensed artists, you can pull off almost 4K graphics that you can use to create graphics.
That's cool.
Because now you're getting the actual official artwork from the persons or individuals that created it, which is a freaking amazing resource. And I'm still trying to get my students back. Ooh, let me tinker with that and see how I can use the skills you just taught me to make something.
So we're definitely getting in the weeds around some of the practical stuff. I think part of our conversation here too is really deepening this idea of how really esports can integrate into CTE and vice versa. One of the interesting things that's been developing on the California side of things, Juan Pablo, in your area, shout out to Allison Frenzel over at the California Department of Ed. She's been working on revamping all of the arts, media, and entertainment CTE pathways in the state of California. And part of that is really looking at the standards for AME and working with industry committees to decide whether or not those skills that are named within those standards are actually applicable to the current industry. And a lot of it, previously was not. It was just kind of just like edu-speak, just talk about things that you can find, but not really the real world skills. And as part of the industry committee, she brought on multiple industry partners to ask what they're looking for. And it's exactly what you're all talking about. It's this idea of just employable skills, right? Some technical skills. They definitely have to have a portfolio. But what's interesting about what she's doing with the AME pathways is also creating registered apprenticeships. And so the idea is that these industry partners can provide industry apprenticeships directly through these pathways. As they go through the pathway, they have an opportunity to apprentice and intern with all of these different organizations. And Chris, you were kind of hitting on that. So thinking about maybe along that side of things, what are some specific skills? Because we wanted to dive into STEM. We're talking about CTE. But beyond just, we're talking a little bit about graphic design, but what are some of those specific skills? And I'll point this one at Doug, because I know he works very closely with some of his students. What are some of those skills that you want to see, that really showcase what they're learning within this space?
Sure. So one of the biggest things that I think of is, in addition to the fundamental skills and the how to, what gets plugged in where and how to do that. That's kind of very basic, and it's pretty routine. But what I want students to be able to do is to solve problems on the fly. When those two things didn't connect the way they're supposed to, and we need to work around, what are the options that we have? How do we figure out, not so much telling them what to think, but helping them understand how to think through that problem and that problem solving paradigm, if you will, to help them be able to accomplish their goal. Because when it comes to the real world application of that, we're not always going to be successful. And so we're not always going to be successful, I should say, on our first attempt. And what's supposed to work or what's supposed to be in place doesn't necessarily function the way we expect it to. Maybe the space that we're producing for is not exactly how we expected it to be. Maybe things are set up in a different place just because of the physical structure of the venue that we're at. We need to be able to work through those problems in real time and also be able to remain calm and not be panicked about when things don't work out. And I think those are kind of the bigger picture skills that I want my students to have.
Absolutely.
I gotta agree with that. You gotta be masters of improv. Like, you never know what's gonna happen. You can plan it, but again, you never know what's gonna happen. You didn't expect rain, and guess what? It's raining. But if you're quick on your feet and you work through those processes to be quick on your feet, it's definitely something to help in any job, not just design, not just marketing or, video editing. It's just in general, if we can teach those skills and have our students have those skills leaving us, and, they're pretty well set.
Yeah, even like I'm looking at a comment from Game Crossing saying that think on their feet because there's no perfectly run tournament or event. I mean, my kids, part of their capstone project for the esports elective is they have to run either a school-wide or a city-wide event, right? And then the other side of this too is thinking about like our GS Esports events. I don't think we've had one event that was not, there was always something going wrong, right? But it was still a successful event. Everybody came, everybody had a good time. And Jarrell, you just did, a massive esports conference. I'm sure, behind the scenes and under that stoic, handsome face of yours, basically, everything was on fire in your brain, but you still got to put on the smile and you get out there and you put out the fires as they happen. And even similar to what you were talking about, Pablo, depending on, the type of kids you serve, I know when my kids, things go south on them and they get frustrated, especially because they don't have the experience or, like a lot of Doug's kids who work directly with Garden State Esports are getting that experience. A lot of my kids get really negative and they either take it out on themselves or they take it out on the people they're working with.
Yeah.
And so I've worked with a lot of my kids to get them to understand is even, if things are going wrong, like we still don't lose our cool, start cursing at people and getting upset and blaming people. And you can't necessarily blame yourself either. Like things just go wrong. I played, I played that Office clip of Michael Scott, when the fire alarm goes off, losing his mind and screaming. You know what I mean? Like, look, when there's an emergency, like this is not how you want to be. Like you got to take a breath, you got to count to 5 and you say, okay, you put out the fires as they happen. And again, like you put on that brave face. So the people, most of the time people don't know. I mean, Jarrell, how many things went wrong and people didn't even know things were going wrong? It's like, if you've ever done theater, you mess up a line, the audience has no idea you screwed up a line. You just keep going.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I'll throw one other thing on here as well. And I mentioned at the top of the broadcast when we were getting started that we have a hybrid program. And one of the things that I want my students to also think about is how can they go beyond where they're at now. So when we get the stream to work and everything's great, we want to make our stream even more accessible. And so the students that I work with every day are deaf and hard of hearing. And so making that accessible to them in real time is very important to me, to my students here in this facility. Our hybrid program functions from Pittsburgh on a campus of deaf high schoolers and from here in Clark Summit with a team of hearing high schoolers and trying to partner them together while at the same time I have deaf and hearing players competing together. There's a lot that can go wrong. Mm-hmm. And so when we get it just working, the other thing that we're challenging our students is how can we do more? How can we make this more accessible? How can we include more individuals in this? So if there is an individual with a hearing loss, there is an individual with some type of physical challenge, how can we help them and support them in being able to be a vital part and play a critical role in what we're doing? And regardless of where you're at, this space is ideal for that. We think that that's a great way for it to be welcoming and engaging. And so not only are you not losing your mind, but you're thinking beyond yourself and where I'm at. And when you're, the old image of the gamer in grandma's basement, in the dark all by themselves, we want to get away from that as far as we can so that we're actually looking outward and saying, hey, how can we bring more people in and how can we include them in what we're doing?
I want to ask this question. So a lot of it from my lens, from my perspective, is how can we support the students? How can we lift the students up? And that's great. But there's this other side to where it's how do we help the teacher? How do we help that educator? Because there have been conversations that I've been privy to where they feel like we can't move forward with this unless there's this. We can't do this unless there's this. And everything that we've said here in this panel, like we make it happen. We see student success, but there are some on the other side that says, well, we can't do this because there's no curriculum or there's no standard or there's no Juan Pablo, there's no Chris, there's no Regina, there's no Doug. We're not the experts. So, and I always say the adults are always the barrier. So when the kid comes in and says, "Hey, I want to do this. I don't know TikTok. I don't know esports. I don't know this. So therefore we can't do it." What can we do to push the adults to move forward? Because the kids are there, but the adults sometimes are the barrier. So I want to know that question.
It's a great question.
Eyebrows are raised.
Yep, all kinds of eyebrows.
I mean, it's hard to me because you can't answer that question necessarily start to make major change in that area without addressing the whole systemic issues of education. You know what I mean? Like just even the way that we still teach and factory model, one size fits all, and we still haven't really kind of embraced project-based learning on a large scale, and we're still worried about what's on the textbook, and we're still worried what's on the test. And you know, I feel like, and you know, I'm always honest with my high school kids because they can, you know, they see behind the curtain. Kids get it, and they understand that, like, okay, we're in high school, which is this cool little box that we created, but what's happening in the box has like nothing to do with happening outside the box. You know what I mean? And so I always feel that kids, especially like now, you know, when we started teaching, I'm only 37, but like I feel like even when I was in high school, it's so much different. You know, the cell phones, the technology, everything's so much different that we weren't even caught up when I was in high school, and we're less caught up than we are now. And for whatever reason, we just kind of like throw our hands up and, hey, education, technology, forget it. You know, it's too hard. Ban everything, block everything, and then you know we get mad that kids, you know, don't necessarily understand the best way to do things sometimes, even not that adults do either, right? My local Facebook page is full of you know, grown adults acting like crazy people. But to me it's like, okay, you know, it's almost like we know that we could do better, we're just not sure how to do it. And I would argue, Bradford, you know, nobody got into this for the money. I have a feeling that schools have tons of passionate educators who, you know, more than half of the club advisors in Garden State Esports have never played games before. They've never coached before. They're the favorite teacher in the room that these kids went to. But I feel like the education system has just like stomped out so much passion from teachers. It's getting harder and harder to find somebody who would be, you know, the next Pablo or the next Doug or the next Regina, because, you know, even what was it in time or whatever, teachers are now like one of the most sought after, you know, private sector, you know, for-profit company, because, you know, educators are great workers. So
I just wanted to jump in really quick. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And just like build off of what you said, because Bradford and I still am an ed tech specialist. And when you said that, it hit a chord. I remember in 2008, that little video Shift Happens came out. And that was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
15 years ago, they were saying we should shift. And nothing has shifted in 15 years. And we've had a pandemic, and, you know, everyone was forced, you know, in a way to up their skills, their tech skills a bit. But we really, I mean, it's not, I work with educators every single day. They're the workers. They don't make policies. They don't make the decisions. You know, they're not buying, you know, the programs. The people at the top have to shift for everyone else to shift. What we generally see are teachers here and there, the risk takers, the 10%, right? They're the ones that we see in the schools taking the risks, even if the rest of the school is not, and sort of pushing them forward. But that's not a good model to really shift the entire culture of education or a school or a district. So again, I remember 2008, Shift Happens. We were all excited, right? And then like nothing. So you're right. It could be esports or any other progressive, you know, thing coming in education. We still have classrooms where desks are in rows. We still have people who are not understanding collaboration and communication and all of these things.
And it leads to burnout. I'm tired, man. You know, I've been teaching 17 years, 16 years. Like, I'm exhausted. 4 school districts, kind of having to re-explain and rebuild. And, have the same discussions about why it's okay for kids to live stream on Twitch for half an hour for a class project. You know what I mean? It gets exhausting, but it's worth it because it's worth it for the kids. But yeah,
Absolutely.
no, I agree.
I also think that this
Speaking,
sorry,
go
guys. I was
ahead.
going to say
No.
this generation, because we are teaching it on purpose. Hopefully schools are teaching, civil discussion in public spaces, digital public spaces, that the next generation might,
Oh, God, I hope
be
so.
a bit more civil online.
Yeah.
Because the adults that are out there right now, they
Yeah.
never got this education. They just here's your phone, go for it. And that doesn't always go well. So hopefully the generation that is growing up, they have a lot of responsibility, because for all of us, I know I wouldn't want, when I was in college, every single thing that I did to be public. So I have a lot of empathy for them, because they are going through a lot. It's a lot to come home to messages on TikTok.
They're never off.
Right,
You can't turn off. You can't unplug. You can't escape it. There's always.
Which is why we do need SEL. They need it actually more than ever. So people need to understand that. It's not just a fad.
I tell my high school kids, I can't wait until they're senators and policymakers, and I'm just hoping that they can fix whatever it is that we've created, because you can't go online or do anything without anybody just screaming at each other, whether it's in all caps or, it's
Still
I'm tired.
screaming.
Bradford, I'm gonna do I'm tired.
As a civics teacher, I'm always like amazed at how people, behave online, because none of us as educators would allow that students to do that.
Right.
We would never allow students to behave like that, right? But adults do that, and they watch adults. I always tell the adults in the room, it's still true. Students will do what you do, not what you say to do. So we should be models, and teachers always have been models. I will say that.
Yeah,
So
and I
wanna-
think it's.
Oh,
I'm sorry, Terrell. I just
No,
wanted
you're
to say,
good.
I think it's important to recognize that those teachers do exist, and they are working hard and they are investing. But I think the key, like Chris said, is the systemic side of it, where the people who are making policies, they have to have that more than just buzzword buy-in. Oh yeah, we love change. We want. Well, then why don't we see it? Well, we don't see it because, quite honestly, we're afraid. We're afraid of all those screaming voices on social media. We're afraid of, the pushback that we're going to get from parents. And unfortunately, the system that we have in education, when change does come, it isn't until we've ruined an entire generation of kids that we go, oh, that wasn't the right thing to do. And let's start again. And so, rather than saying, look, this has real value and we can see it, and strategically implementing that at the administrative level, at the policy level. But we're so early in this here in this group of individuals. We need to inspire that next generation that, this was worth me going down with the ship, fighting for it to make it happen, so that you have the opportunity to reap the benefits, and your kids, your students one day have the same thing. And so, this is my 28th year, Chris, so I hope you make it. This is my 28th year, but I'll tell you what, this has been such an inspiration for me as an educator, because for so long it's been, this is settled knowledge. You just need to memorize these facts. And I'm not that kind of a learner myself, but here's something that's dynamic and changing. And in 28 years, this is the most fun I've had as an educator ever. This is great. And so I want my students to have that kind of experience. So we need to make change, but as an administrator, I need to work with other administrators to help them understand the value of what we're doing.
So I do want to transition a little bit to maybe think about, with Bradford's question around engaging parents, and we're talking about stakeholders, I think the most important piece is really to be able to really hear the voices of the students and the outcomes. And so, candidly enough, we have some special guests that we'd like to bring on. Chris, do you want to maybe introduce and frame kind of our conversation here, when I'll bring our special guests to share a little bit about what they've been working on? Chris, if you're talking, you good?
One day we'll all figure out the mute button. I'm good for it at least once. But as we bring them in, we have some students that have worked with Doug and Garden State Esports to do some in-depth video production. one of the dreams at Garden State Esports was always to have a completely student-run finals event. And as of last spring, after 3 years, we finally got there. Doug came to us looking for a place to play, even though he's not in New Jersey, because not everybody's perfect. We took Doug and his people in. And not only have they been in an unbelievable program, seeing hard of hearing and deaf students playing side by side, on the esports field, but casually Doug one day mentioned that, oh yeah, we have a whole video production team between the schools, and they just kind of run our stream. And then I finally got a chance to watch it, and I mean, it's professional quality. And so, talking to Doug, kind of explaining the vision, for, again, kids running everything behind the scenes, in front of the cameras. And it was amazing. I'm not sure if Regina has the video clip queued up or if we're going to show it, but basically, what was it, Doug? For about 6 months, some of the kids you're going to meet, Eli and Ben, they worked with 3 different high schools, one of which was deaf, 2 of which, were in New Jersey, over the course of 6 months, to teach them not just how to do all the production stuff, but to plan every minute of our show. And it was fantastic because I got to the, place, we got set up the day before. I kind of explained, the big vision of what I was looking for, right? A lot of reaction shots, a lot of interviews, a lot of just hearing, right, what this means to people. And then I just kind of faded away. And every minute of it was run by Doug, his team of students. I think there's something like 35, 40 kids in all, but they worked across state lines, deaf students, hard of hearing students, all working together to put on a 9-hour event. And it was, probably the thing that I'm most proud of that we've been able to do is we've turned it completely over to kids. Excited to say, after some finagling, it looks like we're going to do it again this fall. And so the mission is always going to be to have Doug and his crew and whoever else run the streams, matches of the week, to run all our in-house events and face-to-face events. So, and I can tell you personally, having worked with Eli and Ben and not having taught them, don't know them, until we got to work together. I mean, these kids are just unbelievable. So, bring them in because they're always more interesting than I am anyway.
So why don't we'll play that quick clip. I don't know how many minutes you wanted to play. Just tell me to stop, and then
you're going to see, we did a behind the scenes kind of super cut of all the, stuff that these kids did. And what you're going to see is the few minutes of Ben, who you're going to meet, come on and kind of just talk about what it was like to, as the head of production, as a student, to oversee all of this. I'm not sure if the video has sound, but you're going to see the on-air talent here bring up Ben, who's working behind the scenes, and kind of just listening to Ben and all that it meant for them to get this. I love they call him the loving captain. But it's great because, look, we did this in closed caption, so even though we don't have sound, we're in good shape.
All right, so I'm going to throw you up, Chris. If you want to just ask some questions, I'm just going to pull the rest of us out here. So
Sure.
that way we can focus.
For me, with Ben and Eli and even Doug, talk us through. Ben, you kind of reached out and you wanted to do this not because of any class project. You just had a passion for it. So how did you develop this passion, and how did this passion lead you to jumping in a van and taking days off of school to come set up an esports finals event that, here in New Jersey?
So thank you for having me, Chris and Jarrell from NASEF. It all started back in March. Doug was talking to me during a lacrosse game, which we happen to be streaming for the school sports. And, he asked me, what do you think about esports? I was like, it's awesome. I think it's cool. And he's like, what do you think of streaming it? I was like, I think that'd be cool to get into. We never did that, and it's kind of cool when you try something and you get to develop it on your own, and he was an instrumental part in making that happen. So we basically, in March, we first met. Going into April, the spring season of GSE, we then I think it was about mid-April when we first went over to the Scranton School for the Deaf, which is his affiliate with WPSD, and we bring our equipment. We got a tour of the facilities, and we did our first broadcast there, and it went amazing. We may have had a few kinks, but we got it all done. And then from there was when you reached out to Doug and our interest in doing it for the finals. So that kind of sparked us up. We just would keep broadcasting the WPSD Comets hybrid esports teams matches every week. Slowly bringing in, we started off with just maybe a camera in the room and some commentators. But then one of the things that I'm most proud of and love doing is that we were able to bring closed captions into the hard of hearing and deaf students so that they could experience, the same listening that we could hear as us. They could feel that stream. They're watching the stream just like us all. And I'm really proud of that. It took a lot of brainstorming and attempts, but it worked great. I love seeing the smiles on the faces of the people that were in attendance at the finals event. But basically, we got that invitation from you. Very thankful. We got down to Ryder, set up that Thursday. Had a few kinks, but it went great. We had commentators be able to cover everything between two rooms. And I think it went amazing. It's just remarkable to see that, just that 3 months ago in March, speaking with Doug at a lacrosse game is where it all started. And 3 months later, it became this big thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was wild too because you guys, you roll deep. I mean, I think in total we have a picture somewhere floating around. I think there's something like 35 educators and students that wound up, running the entire spring event. And Eli, you heard Ben kind of talk about working out the kinks and stuff like that. I mean, how did you, handle having to overcome some of these obstacles? Because, like Ben said, and I still couldn't even pretend to understand how you guys did it. But even that closed captioning, that was something that we had talked about for months. And we didn't necessarily know how it was going to work because there was no real closed captioning that was native to Twitch, right? So how are we going to get this live closed captioning onto Twitch, which has an inherent delay, so it matches up with the commentators? Because again, we have, you guys are a partner school, right, to this deaf school, and they have parents and they have a whole community that wants to watch and enjoy, their students, their kids, their sons, their daughters participating, but we're left out. And so again, always trying to be inclusive. That was one of the things that we wanted to do. But I mean, Eli, it wasn't easy. So what was it like, going from streaming sports and some other stuff to running an entire event? I mean, how did you deal with the overcoming the obstacles?
Yeah, so I actually had a very unique opportunity with this because originally I was on the Valorant team, and then I ended up breaking my finger, so I wasn't able to play, but that gave me an opportunity to help with the media team. So I got to cast and work sound with Ben and stuff, and it just let me see both perceptions from it. You get to see how it is playing with everyone and then producing that and the problems that come with both, but you end up working them out.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember Eli is during that finals event, you and your partner were probably some of the best casters I've seen in high school esports.
Well, I don't want to take credit for that. That was actually two other guys. I didn't get to do that down there, but I was working with Ben doing more behind the scenes stuff with that.
Gotcha. And
we might be able to get Ben, Eli out there this year. We might be able to get him on.
Hey, we need more casters. I think your casters graduated, so we gotta reload.
Yep.
So I mean, Doug, from your perspective, as an educator, I'll be honest, it would be hard for me to imagine going to my super, saying, "Hey, let me get these kids in a van. Let me drive them down. Give us the day off." I mean, you guys wound up coming down a 3-hour drive, driving back, and then coming back down. Where now that we have a better process in place, right, we're going to get you guys a hotel and stuff like that. But I mean, what was the process like as an educator to make the opportunity happen? Because I'll be honest, to me, that was the thing that scared me the most. Is I couldn't imagine pitching that, to a super or a principal. But luckily, and then most of your administrators actually came down to the event, and they were awesome.
Yeah, we got great buy-in from the administration of both schools. So so the relationships are clear. The Scranton School for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Children exists. Our physical campus is about 4.5 miles from the Abington Heights campus. The Scranton School is one of the programs of the Western Pennsylvania School for the Deaf in Pittsburgh. So we had one CEO from our organization that I needed to pitch the idea to first. And that was just a hybrid program that we're going to put both of these together. And believe it or not, the biggest challenge was not with the administration, it was with the insurance people. The insurance agents were the ones who were like, hold on, we've got to make sure all this coverage is in place, because what it meant was when we set up the program, we made it so that students from both schools could ride in the other school's vehicles with the other school staff, chaperoning and supervising. And there was a lot of parity that we set up when we proposed the program. So we got that on our side, because quite honestly, in deaf education, we're usually the late ones coming to the party, and hey, we're also going to do what these other schools are doing. But in this particular case, because of our affiliation and partnership with Garden State Esports, we were one of the first schools in the area to have esports, and both at the middle school and high school level. And so we went to Abington Heights and proposed that partnership, envisioning that there would be bigger things down the road. And I think that was probably one of the biggest keys, was that we anticipated there could be more. But when we pitched it to the CEOs, hey, we want to leave school early. I said, you do this for the sports kids when they get a chance to go to the championships, to the finals. You rent buses, you do all this stuff. All I'm asking is that you let me drive a school van from our school, and you let the assistant principal from the high school drive a school van from your school, and we'll take care of the kids. We'll run the whole thing. No extra monies. We'll take care of it. And we were able to do that with incredible enthusiasm from our administrators, not because we cut the cost down, because it wasn't cheap in order to make that trip down there, but because we were able to show them the value of what the students were doing. And not only were the students from Abington producing our esports program, but they were producing the school board meetings every other week. And they were producing other athletic events, live streaming them while we were at the peak of COVID and parents couldn't be in the gym. We're saying, look, this is a value, and we want to show other schools what a fantastic job our students are doing. And this is the showcase potential on Twitch, the exposure, the opportunity for your students to be seen, for our students to be seen, working together in tandem to make this happen is an incredible opportunity that may not come around again. And so I spent a few years in sales, and that seems to have paid off, because they were all about it. They were definitely on board, very enthusiastic with their support.
Yeah, I mean, and Ben and Eli, you hear Doug talking about the value. What do you see the value in what you guys have done? Which, again, I as far as I know, is a national first. I don't know any other events that are completely student-run esports tournaments. What was the what do you see the value?
I think it sets the standard. It sets, okay, we're doing it. Why can't others do it? And it gets that the message out there that this can be done. And I think working with the other schools from New Jersey at the finals, that will set, okay, they've done this. Let's try to do this for our kids. And they're co-advisors. And I think it's great to always do something and then set the standard, and hopefully you see it grow.
Yeah, I mean, Ben, you are the first student that we've actually added to the GSE team, and you taking on a leadership role, mentoring some of these other programs from around the state is really impressive. I mean, Eli, is anything that you've done since you had the serendipitous finger break, is that going to play into your future? I mean, is any of this going to make it into your resume? And do you hope to continue with some of this back end production at the next level?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to keep helping out, and maybe it goes into the future. I think it just made this all so much more accessible, and it shows people that there's an opportunity to do stuff like this, and that it's not just some silly kind of thing.
And do you think, Eli, the fact that you have done it, you have, been in the trenches, worked with the equipment, worked with people, is that going to be more valuable to you than if this was taught as out of a textbook?
Definitely. I think a more hands-on experience really sets you up for the rest of life.
Yeah. I mean, and Ben, I wrote your college letter of recommendation, and I've never written an easier letter than it was for you. But I mean, I know that you've got big plans in the future around this stuff. I mean, what do you hope to do, and how has this experience that Doug and your school district brought to you impacted your future, you think?
Sorry about that. I think it's had, it's just only helped. I've always, maybe we've just done the morning announcement. We started with just the morning announcements, and then we grew to the sporting events over COVID, and then the school district board meetings. But this was another thing that we added to the list. And I think to myself, it's great to have all these different activities that we've done, because it's going to be so much more. Streaming is just becoming so much bigger in the real world. It's more demand, not just in one area, maybe not just in sports, but for an everyday activity. Instead there might be a stream at a local YMCA for a meet or something. But it's great to see. One thing I did want to mention is that in coordination with me and Mr. Boersma, we were able to speak with our high school principal and superintendent to get a course approved and in the writing for curriculum to be implemented for students to actually take next year. So these students can take a course, Intro to Broadcasting, which would go over the equipment we used and teach them about that, and hopefully only further grow the interest in the students. And I was really excited to have that opportunity to, make that possible when I graduate this year, that this could still be alive, and other students can find a passion, because that's how I found it.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite the legacy to leave behind.
Yeah. And I wanted, Ben, I was hoping to tee that up for you, actually, and you got a little ahead of me. I'm excited. We talked, earlier in the broadcast, we were talking about, students are doing this. And I can't stress this enough, that the Abington Heights School District has responded to the passion of the students. They responded to their enthusiasm for broadcasting what their fellow students were doing and involved in, and said, hey, we need to be able to foster this, not just for the students who are already passionate about it, but create an on-ramp through a course, an elective course that students would be able to take to create a broader group of students to discover their interests and pursue those things. And so, I just, hats off to the district for doing that, to Dr. Schaefer, their superintendent, and the school board for their enthusiastic support of what CTE means really at that nuts and bolts classroom level.
Yeah. I mean, and we can dive into this, as you can imagine, for hours, just the systemic change that not only, hopefully Ben and Eli's lives are going to take because of something like this. Doug, tell me all the time you've never been happier and more excited to be an educator, and that this is part of that. And you talk about classes being built out of students' passion for something like this, and and I think that's the big takeaway in hearing from the boys and from you, Doug, and everybody who was on the panel for a minute, is when we let kids follow their passion, it often leads to some really cool results, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we just kind of got to get out of their way and help them follow that passion. So I can't tell you, enough, and I tell you all the time just what it's meant to Garden State Esports. that vision from the beginning has always been to have students running every aspect of the league. So that way these kids have outstanding resumes and hands-on experience. And similarly, we're hoping to do some stuff in New Jersey around CTE and some curriculum stuff, because we want every Ben and Eli out there, and every kid that we haven't met who has a passion for this, right? Let's bring it into the schools, because ultimately, passion at the end of the day is what's going to drive a lot of kid success. So Ben and Eli, I thank you for hanging out with us as always. I'm sure I'll be DMing you guys in the next week or so to talk about the fall finals, which goes down soon. Doug, can't always thank you enough. I mean, really just absolutely inspiring. Not just the stuff you're doing at GSE, but the stuff you're doing for the deaf community, the way you're bringing everybody together. I can't tell you enough how much I admire all three of you, all the stuff that you guys do, how happy I am to have you in Garden State Esports. But thank you to Jarrell and Regina and Pablo and Bradford and everybody else. I don't know if they're popping back in to say goodbye. They are. They are. But Jarrell, I'll let you wrap it up. Oh, you're muted, man. Wow, that's a tough one.
Yeah,
That's
I can do it too. I can do it too. I can do it too. Well, it looks like we have everyone here. I appreciate all of the conversations and perspectives. I guess just to wrap our thoughts here, I mean, we heard a lot from Ben and Eli, and we're talking about really, at the end of the day, it's career technical education in action. And so just from all of your perspectives, Juan Pablo, Bradford, Regina, Chris, and Doug, obviously, I mean, what does that speak to you, and how can we take this forward?
All right, I'm gonna take this one first. I gotta say thank you to Eli and Ben. And I always tell my students things won't happen unless they hear it from you. And what you guys did out on the East Coast with GSC, I hope my students heard this story, because, like I said, they don't want to hear from us. Like, oh, another teacher, yay, money. But if they hear it from a passionate student, that's where the changes happen. So thank you guys. And that's really where it is. It's you, the students.
I'm adding to that. You guys are in high school. That's where it matters. That's where it counts, because when you guys walk out into the world, we're going to be asking you, so how do we do? And we need those we need those truthful answers. And I get an earful from my own kids, and they give me the business. So yeah, I'm piggybacking off of what Juan Pablo said. The adults really need to step out of the way, really listen to what you guys are having to say, and let's start planning.
Yeah.
I'll-
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Regina.
I was going to just say, for me, the wrap up is that we all need to accept that this is a brave new world, and we need to change the paradigm and understand that learning happens everywhere, anywhere. And this is the generation that lives that they don't have to wait to learn something in school. They can teach themselves, and then they pursue it. A very different paradigm than we've had in the past.
Yeah, I think that's you're like kind of reading the script that I have running right here, because for so long education has been about the teacher being the master of the subject matter and imparting all of the knowledge and wisdom that they have. I've got to be honest. I'm the first one to say I really have no idea what I'm doing most of the time. I'm just trying to make the best of what I have in front of me, and do that in a way that inspires the students to say, hey, if this guy can make mistakes after 28 years and keep going, well, then I can make mistakes and I can do it better than he can. And I really want them to know that I'm the biggest cheerleader out there for them to be successful and go forward. And it is all about the students and what we're passing on to them through the opportunities that we create, because they're going to do it so much better. This is they're natives to this world. I will at best only be a transplant trying to figure my way out, and all the time I spend in trying to learn how to do better. I love to be able to look at a student and say, Eli, how did you do that? Can you show me how you set that up, and learn from them? Ben, how did you find that? What was your thinking? Explain that to me, and learn from them, because really this is a journey that we're taking together, and I can't lead them, but I can take it with them for sure.
What a great way to bring it home, Doug. I appreciate that. Juan Pablo, anyone else want to add some final words before we wrap?
I just wanted to say one thing about, what Pablo said about coming from a student. The first time might be tough, and, you're always going to have trouble. I will say we didn't run it perfect the first time, and that's okay. And that's how you learn. And I think coming from a student, we ran it. There was glitches, there was technical bugs, and we only learned from that and make it better. So students should know that first time might not be the best, but it's only going to get better.
Absolutely. So with that, I want to thank Ben and Eli for joining us today, and all of our amazing panelists here, Regina, Chris, Pablo, Bradford, and especially Doug. Appreciate you sharing again all of the amazing work that you all are working on, and your perspectives on how Scholastic Esports can be integrated into schools and educational programs. So thank you for our audience for tuning in. Please tune into our next podcast, which is scheduled not quite yet, but we will let you know. So stay tuned on all of our channels. It's usually the last Tuesday of every month. That may shift a bit just because of the upcoming holidays and whatnot, but just stay tuned. We hope you'll join us for the next one. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you're at.